So where are we going?
Further than we've ever gone before.
The Doctor's back at a hospital with a dark secret.
The sisters are hiding something. One of the patients is conscious. We can't have that.
Doctor Who. Saturday at 7:15 on BBC One.
Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new video, the start of another new series of videos where some of you may remember a year or so ago I did a series of videos looking back at each episode of Series 1 exactly 15 years to the day since each episode aired, or at least I aimed to do it. I didn't quite hit it every week, but near enough. I covered all 13 episodes of Series 1 15 years on from their first air date, and I remember at the time a few people were kind of quite positive about these videos and were asking whether I might continue the trend on this year for Series 2, and so I thought, why not? You know, it's a good little video to do. It's always great to look back on these sort of stories from the earlier years of New Who, some stuff that I just haven't really covered that much on my channel before, to be perfectly honest. So I thought, why not? Let's carry on with this. So of course, today, the 15th of April, marks exactly 15 years since Series 2 of Doctor Who began with the episode New Earth. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So yes, the episode New Earth. I think it's probably not one of the most well remembered and well regarded opening episodes to a series, and I can kind of see why, and we'll sort of get into that. But I think that sort of at the time it was obviously quite a big thing for Doctor Who that it was coming back again, that we're going to have another series. We'd had the big exciting relaunch of the show with Series 1, which was such a critical success across the board. You know, audiences loved it, the critics loved it, like the show had really made an impact by coming back. It just had worked. It fundamentally had worked. Do go check out my videos discussing Series 1. They're still in the playlist on my channel if you want to go and look back at some of my discussions about that and the perspectives on those at the time. But yeah, as I say, fundamentally Series 1 was a brilliant success, and so of course it was going to get commissioned for a second series, and it got the Christmas special as well. Off the back of the success really of the first series, they decided to commission a Christmas special, which was the opportunity to introduce David Tennant's new Doctor, the 10th Doctor, into the show, and give him sort of, well, he doesn't really get that much of the episode because he's asleep for most of it, but kind of get the sort of introduction of the new Doctor out of the way really, almost, so that then we get to this new series and we can kind of just sort of go straight into the adventures of the 10th Doctor and Rose, and kind of don't have to do any establishing or anything, and just go straight into it. And in some ways it's not that common in New Who, remarkably, to have the opening episode of series that doesn't introduce either a new companion or a new Doctor. The only other times, I think the only other times it really happens are Series 6 with The Impossible Astronaut and Day of the Moon, with Series 9 in The Magician's Apprentice, The Witch's Familiar, and in Series 12 with Spyfall, where there's not a new companion or a new Doctor introduced. So it's sort of slight, and I mean, certainly you compare those other three stories, they're very different types of stories compared to this one. And so it's a different sort of challenge to an extent, I guess, writing an opening episode to a series where you haven't really got anything new to introduce, anything new to launch. I know the Doctor was still pretty fresh, only being his second episode, but it still isn't that same kind of element of newness, I think, in it. And maybe that's why Russell T Davies went down the route of going to New Earth, and kind of it still does feel like a very different series to Series 1. I think the tone straight off the bat from this episode, like, of course there's a huge amount more of the kind of flirtatious relationship between the Doctor and Rose, and that right from the first scene is very sort of quickly established. You know, she's completely committed to going and travelling with the Doctor kind of permanently, because she's packed all her bags, she's saying goodbye to her mum and to Mickey, and she's ready to go and travel on the TARDIS for a long time. Certainly seems to be the impression we get there. And so that's kind of a different dynamic to certainly the first half of Series 1, where she's kind of just whisked away and sort of like, why not, I'm just going to go for it, and not really prepared. I know by the end of the Sabine two-parter, she kind of does commit again at that point to leaving, and takes her bags and stuff, but this just feels like a more permanent version of that, I think, at the start of the story, and then they just simply fly off on an adventure, and that's kind of how we decide to start the series. And I think it's always interesting with opening episodes to a series. I think different people like different things from opening episodes. I personally am very much more of the kind of, I love a big, epic, exciting opening episode that really that sort of has some stakes to it, that has some shocks, maybe sets up some stuff that's going to play out over the course of the series. That's kind of more what I look for and enjoy in a series opener. That's why certainly, well, I mean, the three I've listed were just by coincidence, they were those three, but like Impossible Astronaut, Magician's Apprentice, Spyfall, those would probably be my top three openers. Maybe The 11th Hour and Rose would be in there too, but kind of those kind of big stories, and it's not just because they're two-parters, but just having that sort of more exciting sort of story, the bigger story with the narrative setting up for the series, that's kind of more what I enjoy from a series opener. It's not to say that I don't like New Earth. I don't think it's great. It's definitely not one of my favourite openers, but I also don't think it's terrible. I think it's doing something a bit different. I think fundamentally as well, particularly Stephen Moffat and Russell T Davies, they had very different kind of perspectives on what an opening episode is and what it should be and what they sort of wanted to write it like, because you look at all of them, RTD's openers, and they're all kind of more light and comedic and in tone. There's not any sort of heavy continuity in any of them, or anything that's kind of make it hard for a fresh audience to be able to engage with. They're very easy episodes to watch, I think is a pretty way to describe it. You think Rose, New Earth, Smith and Jones, Partners in Crime, they're all very easy, enjoyable, kind of heartwarming, fun episodes with a monster of the week in them all, but they're very much kind of more straightforward Doctor Who episodes, I guess, to an extent, compared to the more complex episodes that Moffat went down, all continuity heavy, sort of, either The Impossible Astronaut or The Magician's Apprentice. Though that sort of aspect is something I prefer personally, but I can see why sort of one might work better for certain purposes. I think for a general audience, probably RTD's approach is a better one. Because I think that New Earth was not a critical success necessarily. Like, it wasn't like, oh my days, this is the greatest episode of Doctor Who ever. That wasn't what critics were saying at the time, but they were saying it's still a great opening episode to the series. It's very much got that kind of light tone to be able to get you easily into it. As much as it's talking about we're in a hospital and there's a load of cat nurse nuns killing people, basically, or cat nurses, I guess, creating and killing people to cure other people. It's kind of quite a morally interesting story, I guess, from that point of view, and that's quite an interesting storyline to explore. And I do fundamentally kind of like the idea. I do like the whole space hospital that we go and explore. It's just not the sort of thing you kind of have ever particularly seen in Doctor Who. I guess maybe something like The Invisible Enemy back in the classic series explores a space hospital, but it's a pretty, I think it's a bit of a rarity in Doctor Who. And I know just the way it's all kind of created is very sort of, futuristic Earth colony type vibes of a sort of idea of a hospital in the future. And I do love the fact it's run by cats as well. I think that's just a really cool idea, a really fun idea. The sort of thing that Russell would come up with. And I don't know, I just love all that sort of setup. I don't think it's a bad idea also reintroducing Cassandra into the show. She's a pretty solid villain in The End of the World. And she's hardly like, the most memorable villain ever. But she's still a fairly solid one, and kind of it ends up being a story where almost the lines are blurred between who exactly are the kind of worst of the villains in the story, because you've got the cat nurses even, who are doing kind of probably the worst stuff of killing people or creating killing people, but then they're doing it to try and cure and save people. But then you've got Cassandra, who just wants to survive, basically, but also doesn't really agree with what the cat nurses are doing, and wants to try and doesn't necessarily want to stop that, but doesn't really agree with that, shall we say? And it's just literally all about survival for her. So it's kind of the lines are blurred between who exactly the real kind of villain is. And I quite like that. I think it just adds a little bit more of a sort of extra aspect and dimension to the story. I do think that David Tennant and Billie Piper are great in this story. I mean, obviously, particularly Billie gets the opportunity to kind of play two characters through a lot of it by being able to play Cassandra, Rose initially and then Cassandra. I mean, Rose isn't really that much of a part in the story because Cassandra's taken over her body for so much of it. But I think that Billie does such a great job of portraying Cassandra. And because it's that fascinating thing of, Cassandra as a character is sort of normally played by Zoe Wanamaker, and she has such a distinct voice and style of playing the character. And so for then sort of another actress to basically have to portray that character and that sort of, bring on that kind of voice and that style, I think is really, really interesting. And it's sort of quite a challenge in many ways to be able to portray that. I mean, I think you kind of, it does get a bit kind of hammed up. You can't deny that, there's some slightly hammy performances in there from the two of them. But I think that's just the nature of the kind of character that Cassandra is, that you've kind of got to ham it up to be able to play her in a entertaining way. And I think that's okay. I don't think that's a big problem. And but I do think that Billie does a great job of that. And when David gets the opportunity to kind of take over Cassandra as well in occasional scenes, he also clearly has a lot of fun with it. I'm sure it's the sort of episode that they were all laughing on set, having to say some of the lines they said as Cassandra and some of the fun moments of it. I'm sure it was a hilarious sort of filming day when they were doing those sort of bits, and that must have been really, really fun. But yeah, I just think their performances really, really strong throughout this story, no matter who they're sort of playing as characters. And the bits we do see of the Doctor and Rose together, as I say, really solidifies that clear kind of love and affection that certainly Rose has for the Doctor, and I think almost like the Doctor doesn't really kind of likes. I don't know if he necessarily completely feels it the other way. I think probably by the end of the series he kind of does. It's kind of looking that way, but he kind of almost doesn't just enjoys the kind of, you know, ego boosting of her kind of being slightly in love with him. I think he kind of appreciates that almost more than necessarily wanting to kind of, you know, reciprocate it all the time. And that's just, of course, that's an interesting dynamic we're going to explore over the 13 weeks of doing these videos and watching these episodes all over again, which I'm looking forward to sort of exploring. But I think New Earth as an episode, it's just kind of solid. It's just kind of okay, reasonably good Doctor Who. It's not the sort of premiere that, for me nowadays, would like get me really excited and hooked on the show, but I'm sure 8-year-old me, back when I first watched it in 2006, would have loved it. It would have been brilliant, exciting, funny. You know, I think there's sort of a great threat in there with the diseased people. And to be fair, watching sort of through the mid part of this story, when you've got all the diseased people being unlocked out of their sort of cages and one walking around and trying to sort of take out basically all the people in the hospital and they're then more trying to protect against it, that for me felt genuinely quite exciting and enthralling. I don't know, maybe it's just that thing of like, you know, touching it and you're going to be possessed and die, and that's it. It's sort of quite sort of high stakes there, I guess, in a sense. And I just really enjoyed that. I really entered into that. I really felt like, you know, I felt the kind of thrill of it and the excitement of it and the danger and the threat of that through that period of the story. And so I think that particular aspect worked really well. And I certainly didn't mind the kind of zombie attack Doctor Who episode. I don't think that's, you know, Doctor Who crosses into so many different genres that I don't think a kind of sort of mild zombie attack type thing is anything that's kind of out of place in Doctor Who, in my opinion at least. Maybe it can be said that the kind of resolution of the story is quite quick and quite rapid. You know, the Doctor just magics up a load of medicine into the sort of bucket and then sprays it onto a few people, and all they touch each other, and well, hey, they're all saved, they're all healed, it's all fine. It kind of, you know, I think that's a problem so often in Doctor Who, and I don't think there really is a great solution to it, to finding a quick, you know, having a great resolution that really feels satisfying. It's so hard to do that and not just have a magic wand waved or equivalent to sort of save the day and solve the problem when you've got such a short episode as well to be able to play with. So yeah, that's probably one kind of main detracting point of it, and maybe the lack of the high stakes at points is something that kind of brings it down for me a little bit. So yeah, New Earth, by no means is it bad in any way. I don't dislike it as a story. I think it's just kind of average Doctor Who, I guess, and that's never a bad thing. I think this is it fits within an era of, you know, great popularity, huge popularity for the show. I think really from the start of this series onwards through the rest of the David Tennant era is where Doctor Who really, at least in the UK, grows so exponentially. Of course, Chris Eccleston did a great job of establishing that in the first series, but I think the dynamic between the Doctor and Rose just helps the show to grow more and more and more throughout this series that we're going to explore and into the following couple of series as well. And this is kind of the starting point of that. You can really see already the kind of, you know, the signs of the relationship they've got and the way they'll be together through different adventures and stuff is all laid out in this first episode, I think, and ready to be explored further through the episodes to come. And of course, the one other mention is the face of Bo, who gets another rollout in this story and doing his very ominous, like, oh, you're going to meet me one more time and I'm going to tell you this big mysterious secret and all that. And it's kind of teasing slightly, of course, what we know is to come, that he'll reveal you're not alone and then the Master and so on and so forth. And it is fun, as always, it's fun watching these episodes with the face of Bo in and imagining that is Captain Jack. So yes, that's pretty much my kind of thoughts and look back on New Earth. Please do let me know in the comments below what do you think of the story, what do you think of it now. If you watched it back in 2006, can you remember what you thought of it back then? Like, I know it's a long old time ago, 15 years, but if you can, either of those, I'd love to hear from you down in the comments below. But apart from that, guys, as always, please hit that like button, that subscribe button if you're new here, and I'll see you again very soon for a brand new video. Goodbye.